so often things going on that are beyond our control, that we can do very little about, and yet we know that you are always there, and that you are far more powerful than we are. And yet, God, we also know that when we pray to you, it is often through our praying that you open our eyes and open our hearts to the ways that we can work together to further your kingdom and to bring healing and peace and wholeness, not just in a world to come, but in this world. And so, God, as we look at the damage and destruction caused this past week in the Bahamas and other places as well, we ask not only that you would hold those people in your love and care, and that you would provide for them, but that you would also open our eyes and open our hearts to ways that we can be part of our answer to that prayer. God, we lift up those who are struggling with health and those who have hope for healing, and we just ask for patience along the way during that time of waiting. We ask for patience during that oftentimes slow process of healing. We ask for your strength and your hope that it would abide in the hearts of all those who are waiting for healing and health and wholeness, that you would give them all that they need to get to where you would have them be. God, we lift up our church and ask that you would continue to lead and guide and move among us as we continue with joy to serve and to grow and to be your hands and feet in this community and in this world. We pray this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. I invite you now to hear our sermon reading, which comes from the Gospel of Luke, and I'll ask you, if you're able, to please stand for the reading of the Gospel. Now large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you intending to build a tower does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all of your possessions." This is the word of God for all of us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. Let us pray. Speak through me or speak in spite of me, but speak, O Lord. For we, your children, long to hear a word from you. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So friends, when I was in middle school, quite a few years ago, some people think that was only like 2 or 3 years ago, but when I was in middle school, one of my favorite teachers featured a cartoon from Gary Larson's famous comic strip, The Far Side. And on that cartoon, it showed this young boy pushing on a door with all of his might, straining as hard as he could. And above him on the door were 4 letters: P-U-L-L. And to top it off, to the side of the boy who was pushing and straining on that door was a sign that had 5 words: Midvale School for the Gifted. Now, when I was in middle school 2 years ago, or a long time ago, I think I liked that shirt because it was always good for a few laughs. When you're in middle school, you like being able to get some laughs from people. But as I look back on it, what I like about that shirt is that it reminds me that no matter how gifted somebody is, no matter how bright or learned somebody is, we always have room to learn. And sometimes, like that boy pushing and straining on the door that said pull, sometimes we even need to go back to the basics. With school having recently started back, everybody I think is in that routine now, I think it's a good time for us to all remember that we all have room to learn and grow as disciples of Jesus Christ, as students, as followers of Jesus Christ. And so we're going to take the next 4 Sundays to kind of go back to school, to go back to the basics together, and talk about the most fundamental part of our faith, what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Because like that boy in the Far Side cartoon pushing and straining on that door, no matter how much you know, no matter how gifted you are, no matter how old or how young you are, every single one of us has room to grow in our discipleship as followers of Jesus Christ. And so I think a helpful point to start at when we're talking about what it means to be a disciple is to get a clear picture of what on earth we would be getting ourselves into with discipleship. It seems like when Jesus called those first disciples nearly 2,000 years ago, that a lot of the people who were flocking and who wanted to be his disciples had absolutely no clue what it meant. Have you ever had something where you got into it and then you realized once you got into it that you had no clue what you got yourself into? Yeah. I know that surely nobody's ever done this here, but maybe you've got on a church committee and then you realize once you accepted that invitation to be part of it, that your term would not expire until you did. You ever had one of those? No? Or maybe you like the idea of being on a sports team, or even just getting into better physical shape, until you got into it and realized that meant you're going to have to run, right? And sweat, and that it might hurt. Sometimes I remember back at the beach. We were doing this weekly men's workout group at the men's homeless shelter. And there was this 18 or 19-year-old who was actually staying at the shelter, but we got him to come out and exercise with us. And I'm not making this up, he did one push-up. And he said, I can't do anymore. It hurts. And this man who also was at the shelter, he kept doing this push-up and he goes, I know, that's the point! Boy, couldn't do it. He realized what he got himself into. Maybe you had an experience like my wife Marissa one time. She was asked to serve as the vice president of a group in the community. And the big selling point to her was if you're vice president, you don't have to do anything. Well, 2 or 3 days later, when the president quit, guess who was suddenly responsible for the next 2 years of planning and leading every single meeting? The one who was told that she wouldn't have to do anything. Sometimes we don't know what we're getting ourselves into. And as the crowds gathered around Jesus a long, long time ago, clamoring to be his followers, the vast majority of them had no idea what they were potentially getting themselves into. There were some people surely who were amazed at Jesus' healings. And they thought, man, if I could just spend all my time around this guy, I'll be in the best health of my life and everything will be great. Others were enamored with his message. They thought, man, this guy's going to stick it to Rome, and I want to be part of that. Still others were astounded at his miraculous feeding of the masses, and they thought, man, I'll never have to go hungry again if I just follow this Jesus. There were surely many people who flocked towards Jesus because maybe some of their other friends were doing it, or because maybe some other members of their family were doing it. Or maybe they just thought it's going to be one exciting moment after another, after another, after another. I imagine some people who wanted to follow Jesus even thought, you know what? This Jesus guy is the one thing that was missing from my life. If I just add Jesus to my life, if I add Jesus to all those things I already have going for me, then I'll be complete. And so the people continued to flock to Jesus, eager to be his disciples, his followers, his students. But Jesus knew better. Jesus usually knows better, right, than we do. He knew what they were getting themselves into, and so he wanted to be sure that they knew what was at stake. He knew that it wouldn't always be excitement and amazement, because for every exciting, miraculous moment, there would probably be hundreds of moments of boredom, of struggle, pain, sacrifice, even grief. He wanted them to know the cost, to know what they were getting themselves into before they became his followers. And so Jesus did what every good teacher does. He gave them a rundown of the course syllabus. Any of you ever have teachers who give you that course syllabus on the first day of school? Yeah? Maybe some of you were teachers who gave a syllabus. And that syllabus was always it was like a golden nugget, right? Because you could take it home and you could read everything that you were going to be expected to complete to pass the class. And you could see, this is how the teacher's going to grade me, and this is how the teacher's going to relate to me, and this is how many classes I can skip. Miss for sickness. Right? And you could take it home and you could say, you know what? I'm all in. Or you could say, you know what? I'm going to drop this class, and I'm going to get into one that's a little easier. Right? The syllabus told you exactly what you were getting yourself into, so you could know if you were going to get out or stay in. And so Jesus read those crowds his course syllabus, so to speak, and it sounded something like this. Thank you for your interest in being one of my disciples. Before you decide whether to continue on this path, please make sure this is exactly what you really want to do. Just like a good builder makes sure she has what it takes to complete a building before she starts. And just like a good ruler makes sure he has the army he needs before he declares war on his enemy, please take a moment to make sure the requirements of being my disciple are worth it to you. There are only 3 requirements, and here they are, in no particular order. 1, if you wish to be my disciple, you must first hate your family and life itself. Now, I imagine at this point most of the crowds around him stopped listening and they were Number 2, if you wish to be my disciple, you must carry a cross, a symbol of capital punishment. Number 3, if anyone is still here listening to me considering this ludicrous offer, then if you wish to be my disciple, you must give up all of your possessions. And I imagine that Jesus looked out after saying that, and there probably wasn't much of anybody left. Given the description of what it means to follow Jesus, I think the astounding thing isn't that out of the thousands upon thousands of people Jesus encountered, that only 12 people chose to be his follower. I think the astounding thing is that anybody chose to follow him at all. Even if we water down Jesus' words, we Christians tend to be good at watering down Jesus' words, right? It makes it where we can stomach them. They're still difficult to swallow. We could say, well, when Jesus said to hate your family and even life itself, he didn't really mean it like that. We could say, like the great late preacher Fred Craddock, that he once said, he said, to hate is a Semitic expression meaning to turn away from, to detach oneself from. There's nothing of that emotion we experience in the expression, I hate you. To hate one's own life is not a call for self-loathing, to regard oneself as a worm, to toss oneself on the trash heap of the world. What is demanded of disciples, however, is that in the network of the many loyalties in which all of us live, loyalties to family, friends, political parties, sports teams, and the great network of loyalties in which all of us live, the claim of Christ and the gospel not only takes precedence, but in fact redefines all the others. This can and will necessarily involve some detachment, some turning away. So we could say say Jesus didn't really mean hate. Jesus really just meant put God before everything else. We could say Jesus didn't really mean that his disciples had to carry a literal cross. We could say Jesus didn't really mean that his disciples shouldn't own anything at all. And if we said those things, I think we would be correct. But is that watered down version of what Jesus said necessarily any easier to stomach? I mean, tell me, have you ever had, and you don't tell me actually, because you might get some fights in the pews here, but have you ever had to talk to a family member who you knew loved you and who you loved, and because your Christian faith compelled you to perhaps say something to them that you knew they were not going to receive well? Maybe you have, every family has that relative, right, who maybe goes off bad-mouthing the humanity of some particular person or some group of people, whether it's because those people are Democrats or Republicans or Muslims or immigrants or foreigners or whatever. Right? We all, I think, have that one family member. And you had to choose between silently keeping the family peace or speaking up and defending the image of God and the humanity in that other person or in that other group of people at the risk of alienating someone you love. Or maybe you had to choose between upholding the expectations that family members you loved had from you, rather than taking a different path that you believe Jesus was calling you to take, one that those people you loved would have at best said was impractical, and at worst was absolute foolishness. I'm reminded of a preacher who shared once about preaching a sermon on Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan. The story where Jesus tells about the Samaritan who sacrificially gave of so much of what he had to care for a complete stranger. And sitting in the congregation that day was a young woman, a college student, who had been wrestling with what she considered to be a call from God to leave this major that she had been studying that would have led to a lucrative career, and to instead leave school and to become a missionary and to be poor for the rest of her life. And so she heard that sermon, she was touched by that message, and so as soon as the service ended, she took that as confirmation that, you know what, I need to follow this path and become a missionary. So she raced out the door, jumped in her car, drove to her hometown, ran up the front steps of her family's home, walked in the front door, and told her parents, "Parents, I know that you have sacrificed so much to put me in this school, to set me up for this bright future, but God is calling me to leave all that behind and to become a missionary and to be poor for the rest of my life." Well, the next morning, guess who got a phone call at the church? The preacher. And on the other end of the line, there was this very good, upstanding, Christian, angry father. And the father said, "Preacher, you've got to call my daughter and tell her it was just a sermon. Tell her it was just a sermon." Jesus knew that discipleship was not something that we can just add to our life to make it complete, but rather that discipleship demands to take the place of our lives. He knew that if we chose to follow him, then that relationship would take precedence over and redefine all the other relationships in our lives. He knew that choosing the path of discipleship would mean detaching oneself from one's own life in order to take up the only life that was truly worth living. Jesus knew that being a disciple would mean having one's daily bread and perhaps not much more, because it's hard to keep up with Jesus when we're carrying 3 bags of our belongings in each hand and pulling a trailer behind us. It's hard to be a disciple. And if that's what discipleship means, if that's where discipleship leads, then why on earth would any of us want to be one? I think there's a story of a man who once had it all and who gave it all up because of the call of Christ that that I think gives us a hint as to why someone might want to be a disciple. And that very gifted young man had achieved all kinds of scholarly success that basically freed him to go anywhere in the world he wanted to teach and to learn and to study. And on one of those occasions when he was overseas, there had already been a lot of trouble brewing back in his home country. But things really spilled over and it became a lot more violent and challenging. And so he was in a safe place overseas from there. And he had a dilemma. Do I go back home where I don't know what's going to be waiting there for me, what kind of disaster will await me there? Or do I stay here where I'm safe and where I can do all these things that I've always dreamed of doing and know that I'm going to be okay? Well, you can imagine that most of the people who loved and cared for him told him, look out for yourself. Don't go back home. Stay here where it's safe. Protect your own life. Enjoy the fruits of your labors. But one wise dear friend, a man of faith, had something different to say. He said, if you don't go home, then you'll be abandoning your country in its greatest hour of need. And so touched by those words, and touched perhaps by the words of Jesus, who once said, those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. This young man returned home to be present with others who were suffering at the hands of a very violent regime. In fact, he became part of an underground effort to end the government-sanctioned violence and killing that had broken out all over his home country. Now, before you think the story has this happy ending with rainbows and butterflies and all these great things, it doesn't. Because eventually that young man was caught, arrested, and imprisoned. And on April 9th, 1945, at the age of 39, for his role in a plot against Adolf Hitler, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, pastor and theologian, was executed at the Flossenburg concentration camp. In one of his works, which was actually called Discipleship, but after his death was renamed The Cost of Discipleship, he wrote the following. He said, if our Christianity has ceased to be serious about discipleship, if we have watered down the gospel into emotional uplift, which makes no costly demands and which fails to distinguish between natural and Christian existence, then we cannot help regarding the cross as an ordinary, everyday calamity, as one of the trials and tribulations of life. In other words, if discipleship is something that we don't take seriously, that makes no demands of us, that if our faith is more about doing what we've always done, or leaving here feeling good about ourselves, and not about sacrifice, in the same manner that Christ has sacrificed for us, then the cross is nothing more than just one more Sabbath day in the history of the world that has absolutely no impact on how we live our lives today. So why would somebody choose to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? I think it all comes down to something that late executed pastor, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, called costly grace. In talking about discipleship, as darkness continued to build all around him in his home country, he said this. He said, grace is costly because it calls us to follow. And it's grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It's costly because it costs a person their life. And it's grace because it gives a person the only true life. Now I'm going to repeat that because I think it's important. He said grace is costly because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. And it's great because it calls us to follow. And it's grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It's costly because it costs a person their life. And it's grace because it gives a person the only true life. My experience is that the costly, grace-filled decision to follow Jesus as a disciple isn't so much a one-time decision that we make, but it's a decision that we make every morning when we get out of bed. Not just in the past, but today. Jesus calls to you and to me, saying, "Come, follow me." And tomorrow when we all wake up, Jesus will call us again and say, "Come, follow me." And the next day, Jesus will say, "Come, follow me." Every day, we have the opportunity to answer that grace-filled, costly call of Jesus. And no matter how you answered it yesterday, no matter if you have never answered it before, this very day, you have the opportunity to answer that call again. And so I want to ask you, you may be a church attender, but today, will you choose to be a disciple? You may be a church member. You may have been a church member for 50 years. But today, will you choose to be a disciple? Heck, you may even be a preacher. But today, will you choose to be a disciple? My friends, today, may you set aside whatever it is you carry and hang on to instead of the cross of Jesus Christ. And may you take that costly journey in Jesus' footsteps, knowing that the cost of doing so, and there is a cost, pales in comparison to the grace that is shown to us by the one in whose footsteps we follow. Will you be a disciple? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I invite you to stand as you're able in our little black hymnal as we sing together 2129. My friends, as you go forth from this place, may all that you say and all that you do not just be